There's the issue of what is the ego, and here in Jungian psychology, we're not talking about hubris. Okay, so the ego is everything that you have in consciousness. So we're certainly not talking about giving up the ego. We are talking about having a wider consciousness that allows us to understand that there is some other force, may the force be with you, that is coming up inside of us in the form of what Dr. Jung would call the spirit, and that spirit is gradually changing us. Going on to paragraph 9, from an externalistic standpoint, we cannot understand the East. And that's an issue. I mean, I go to a Buddhist meditation class every Monday at noontime. And one of the things that gets under my skin about it is how passive Buddhism is and how passive it makes its followers, or seems to. But they try to understand wholeness, and they haven't been separated as much from the instinctive side in their spirituality as we have. And so that's one of the points of this evening, which is, in order to have wholeness, we have to have both the instinctual side and the spiritual side. And, we see that playing out in our politics, among other places. Now, from Dr. Jung's point of view in 1929, or whenever he was writing this, even scholars think the I Ching is filled with abstruse magical spells, and what he's saying is that modern psychology offers a path to understanding. And so it so happens that I also got a copy of the I Ching today. And so this is the I Ching, which is translated by Wilhelm and into German, and then by Carrie Baines into English. And this was published by Princeton University Press a long while ago. The cover of it is quite damaged, and it has a price of $7.50 in the dust cover, so that is a long while ago. But anyway, it appears to be an interesting book, and I'm looking forward to reading it over time. I'm not anywhere near ready to consider doing a class on it, but okay. So paragraph 10, Dr. Jung admits he was completely ignorant until Richard Wilhelm arrived. But Dr. Jung's clinical technique, what the Chinese had come up with, what the Chinese had followed for centuries. And so the images that had come up in his consulting room were the same as the images that were described in the I Ching and in The Secret of the Golden Flower. So he says, quote, "Its contents form a living parallel to what takes place in the psychic development of my patients." And so there's this instinct continuum scale. And actually, what I'm going to do, that's not a very good way to show it to you. I want to talk for a minute, because we are talking about Dr. Jung's practice a little bit. I want to show you the psychoid layer. So I think I can show you that without too many flashes. There's some bonus material about this in in the advanced reading group, but just to give you an overall perspective, I think it's useful to understand these three sources of psychic healing. And I'm just going to leave this up for another minute or so because the flashing is irritating. And so if you're watching this on video replay, please go back to where I'm showing it and just stop the video so that you can read it if you want to. But the flashing is going to get too much otherwise. Okay, so this perspective on the psychoid layer comes from this book, The Psychoid Soul and Psyche, Piercing Space-Time Barriers by Belford, Ulanov. And Dr. Ulanov is Emerita Professor of Psychiatry and Religion. I had a guest on my arm here. In my Buddhist way, I hope he's going on to his the rest of his life here. So anyway, I thought it was interesting because she talks about three activities that analysts use to help analysands in the psychological therapy room. And so the first is to help the analysand know that they're experiencing something that many others also suffer. And so, this may be an immature person who doesn't realize that whatever trouble they have in their life is something that happens to lots of people. And that in itself can be curing. And I'm sorry, I'm going to take that off the screen, but please go back to it if you're watching the replay. Okay, the second source of psychic healing is that the analysand is connected to a religious outlook again. And there's this famous quote that Dr. Jung gave at one point, in which he said, "Among all my patients in the second half of life, that is over 35, none of them has really been healed who did not regain his religious outlook." And so that's in an essay called Psychotherapists or the Clergy by C.G. Jung. It's found in volume 11 of the collected works, paragraphs 488 to 538. And you can find it in the Dropbox for them's knows. And if you are not in our general Dropbox, you can send me an email. I will give you my contact information. You can send me an email, and I will be happy to include you in our general Dropbox. We also have a separate Dropbox for the advanced reading group. But anyone who can hear this now is welcome to join our general Dropbox. Okay, so moving along. So the third source of psychic healing, according to Dr. Ulanov, is to experience the psychoid layer. And she describes the psychoid layer in four ways. So these are, in effect, psychic facts, like Dr. Jung uses psychic facts. And so the first of these psychic facts is, number one, it cannot be perceived directly. It cannot be represented by word or image. It is unknown and unknowable. And so the archetypes are example of psychoid events, and they are identical in all individuals across the human species. and many of them also are easily seen in other species. They are only known through behavior, emotion, and image generated. And so that's the first idea, which is that archetypes themselves, we cannot clearly define them. We can define them in some ways, but we can't clearly define them as, there's no way to just write down and have every element of an archetype. So number two, it manifests both physically and psychically. And what that means is it's two sides of the same coin. It's experienced in opposition. And so on one end of the spectrum, it's instinctual. And on the other end of the spectrum, it's spiritual. And what she says is this is the scale along which consciousness itself slides. I have a favorite image, which I didn't prepare for tonight, but what it shows is the Decorah eagle. As you know, there are many of these new webcams on explore.org and various other places where you can watch the life cycle of many different species. And my wife and mother-in-law have been particularly taken with this, and one of the ones that you can watch is called the Decorah, as in Decorah, Iowa, Decorah, Decorah, Iowa, eagle. And there's an eagle's nest there that's been there for several years. And last year, in February, they have an infrared camera on it, so we can see the eagle at night, even though she doesn't know that she's being filmed, but she has a infrared spotlight on her, so for us, she's very clear. And it had snowed, and she's sitting there with this, she's really hunched down on her eggs, and on top of her head is about an inch of snow, and she's not moving for anything. And that's an example of this mother archetype. And obviously she's not a human being, but that's it's a behavior that you can observe in almost any species, certainly any species that you can observe on explore.org. You can see the mother archetype everywhere in nature. So number three, experience confirms it, and it opens onto the unus mundus. So I'll just read these points and then I'll come back. So it's one world where the familiar binary ego no longer obtains. In other words, there's a relationship that's going on. In the case of a therapist in a therapy session, you're in the moment and everything else falls away. And obviously, if you've ever had a lover or someone who you wanted to attract to be a mate, sometimes if you go out to dinner, you're having a conversation with that person and everything else falls away. You know, the waiter comes up next to you and has to shake you to get your attention because you're not even seeing the waiter. And so these also come out of, these experiences come out of synchronicity, non-causal events, and they're religious experiences, and they give you a sense of meaning. And Dr. Ulanov assures us we did not invent these. This is a land beyond space and time. So again, you know, from any conversation with a lover or whoever, if if you're having a good conversation, space and time disappear. And so the famous one in Dr. Jung's life was when he met Dr. Freud for the first time and they spoke for 13 hours nonstop. That was an example. And she says it can be lived but not represented. Well, I'm going to take slight exception to that because I have managed to catch 2 of these on video for sure, and another one on photos. And probably most of the people that are watching this right now have seen these, have seen this. But in any case, if you look up synchronous and numinous on the YouTube channel, in fact, I guess I probably ought to just, while I'm here, I probably ought to just give you the link so that everybody has the link. But you will see one of these events actually happen to me, and there's a playlist on the channel called Breakthroughs to the Unconscious, and there I have several videos that are related to this point, but what I want to give you is one specific video. And I'll give you the link here in just a moment. Yoo-hoo. Impossible just takes a little longer. So this was a, you may not think it's very impressive, but I think it's incredibly impressive. And I've had a number of Jungian analysts tell me that it was pretty impressive. And so here's the link to the video. You can watch on your own time if you haven't watched it before. It's the video that has the Navy's Blue Angels in the first image of it. And so that was one of these psychoid experiences for me. And in order to appreciate how this affected me, you need to listen to the very first sentence in the video. And then you can start at about 2 minutes and 9 seconds into it. You can see the actual event. And then at about 4:55, you see how the emotion starts to work on me. In fact, you see it immediately through the next 3 minutes of the video, but you can see how the emotion works on me in terms of the meaning of that particular synchronicity, which is certainly this kind of experience that she's talking about from the psychoid layer. And so the fourth point is that it transgresses all boundaries. So it's a seed for future consciousness, number one. So obviously it was a seed for me immediately. And for those of you who've watched the video in the past, you'll see it there. And as I said, in this Breakthroughs to the Unconscious playlist, you can find another video and several other references to this kind of event that I have caught on video or on imagery and cameras specifically. But she says the boundaries can be known only approximately. It can be in circumstances, which it is in my video, and it can be liberating. It breaks the usual ways of knowing. And boy, there's no doubt in my mind that this is this was definitely a religious experience for me, a very profound experience. And when you listen to it in the juxtaposition of what I was reading and the perfect timing of it, you almost can't have any doubt. And one thing that you can be very sure of is that nobody can fake that one. Nobody.